We've got Alison Lester coming up in a moment. Yes, that's what I just heard. It's coming here to talk to us about how and why she came to write some of her books. We've called her session this afternoon, Find Your Inner Storyteller. But just before I introduce her properly, I just want to let you know, I'm sure you're going to have a bajillion questions to ask Alison after her session, so we will make sure there's plenty of time for those, but please don't be upset if we don't get around to all the questions, because there are lots of you, and there's only so much time that we have. I also want to let you know that Alison will be signing books after the session, again, back on the Senior School Oval, where no doubt you've just come from, and make sure you do head over there before you go back to school. Before you go back on your bus and then back to school. But right now, let me introduce Alison to you. And I'm just going to show you her beautiful book, Magic Beach. Okay, Alison Lester's childhood sounds idyllic. She grew up on a farm by the sea. She first rode a horse as a baby in her father's arms, beginning a lifelong love of horses. She still lives in the country and she rides her horse Woollyfoot. Alison's picture books mix everyday life with imaginary worlds, encouraging kids to believe in themselves, that's you guys believing in yourselves, and celebrate what makes you different. She's deeply committed to the community and she spends part of every year travelling to remote Indigenous communities, helping children and adults write and draw about their own lives. She's here to inspire and teach us today using her wealth of experience. It's the legendary, nothing short of legendary Alison Lester. Will you please join me in giving her a magnificent round of applause?
Thank you for that beautiful introduction, Deb. And good afternoon, girls and boys and teachers and mums and dads, anyone else who's here. I'm very excited to be over here in Perth in this beautiful sunshine, talking to you about books. And I've got a selection of slides here to talk about where some of my ideas come from, and then I'll show you how some of my books happen. So this is one of the things that really inspires me, and this is the place that I live. We live out in the country and we've got a big garden that's a very messy garden, and I love seeing the seasons come and go. We've probably lived there for 40 years, so I've seen the garden turn from a blackberry patch into a big garden where at every time of the year there's something going on. But this time of the year, autumn, is especially nice where the colours are all changing. The other thing that I get a big kick out of is animals. So we have a lot of dogs in our family. The dog at this end, the hairy dog, is called Dave, and my daughter Claire wrote a book with him on the cover, and it's called Do You Love Dogs? So you might have seen that book. And then there's a whole selection of family dogs along there. They're all looking a little bit anxious because everyone's going, sit on that couch and don't move while we take the photo. I've also got horses, which I love. You probably noticed there's lots of dogs and lots of horses in my books. So this is dear old Woollyfoot, who looks a little bit funny because he's wearing a fly mask to keep the flies off him. And the little pony is a pony called Bella, who became Noni the pony. So she's quite famous. I also get a huge kick just out of things that I find when I'm walking around. This was a leaf that I came when I was walking in the bush that had those beautiful droplets of water like little jewels on it. And then another time when I was hiking up in the Northern Territory, I saw these beautiful gum blossoms just lying on the ground. So just exquisite little things like that I'm always looking out for. And you probably see those things too. And if you keep them in your mind, when you go to do work later on, often the colours or the shape of them will come back to you. I also love working with kids. And this is a beautiful big canvas that I made last year up at Fitzroy Crossing, up in the north of the state. The canvas, or you can see it's hanging on a clothesline, so it's about 2 metres by 1.5 metres. And we'd gone for a lovely boat trip up, what's the gorge at Fitzroy Crossing? Is it Geeky Gorge maybe? Or Winjana Gorge, whichever one. And Joe, who was an Aboriginal elder, had told us a wonderful story about the crocodile who wouldn't share his campfire. So when we came back, the kids sat down and we all drew things about the crocodile and all the animals. So working with children also gives me a huge amount of inspiration, and I'm always so impressed at how many of you are wonderful drawers? How many of you love making pictures? Oh, that's pretty good. Well, hang on to it. wasn't quite as good as the grade ones this morning. They're the ones who really love drawing. And you have to remember as you get older not to get put off by people thinking your drawing's a bit funny or your painting's a bit funny. Just keep at it and you'll end up being someone who just loves it and is good at it. I also love dressing up. Here's Alison, the astronaut. About every month I go to the Royal Children's Hospital in Melbourne and with my friend Janie Godwin, and we do art with the kids. And once they were doing space and they actually had an astronaut suit that I could try on, and I couldn't resist trying it on. So all these things are quite a good recipe for making books, just using all the things that you come across in your life as your inspiration. And then these ones are a whole lot of my grandchildren, so they are the ones that really are giving me heaps of inspiration at the moment with all the things they get up to. There's Tricky's Bad Day and Noni the Pony, and how many of them? 5 of them. There's another 2, so life is very busy at the moment. This is where I grew up. I was a very lucky kid who grew up on a beautiful farm overlooking the sea. And I was the youngest of 4 kids and I had my own pony, so I had a lot of time to just ride out by myself and imagine. I was always imagining what would happen if a gang of bushrangers came over the hill, or I found an abandoned kitten stuck up a tree, or there was a wallaby with a broken leg. Like, I was always looking for a big adventure, even though I was actually having quite a big adventure myself probably. That farm is very close to a place called Wilson's Promontory, and there's a lighthouse at Wilson's Promontory. This is a view from the sea, but if you walk to it, it's a 20-kilometre walk in. You can't drive in there. So that's a place I really love to go to get inspiration. And it's just across Waratah Bay from where Magic Beach is set at Walkerville. So there's a picture of me and Bigsy at Walkerville riding our bike along the beach. Bigsy's got quite short legs, so when I ride around to get the paper, he has to go in the basket because he can't keep up, and he quite likes that. I put a towel in so it's a little bit comfortable, and his ears fly in the wind when I go fast. Can anyone tell where I am in this picture? Yeah? Antarctica, that's right. I'm such a lucky person. I know I'm showing off, but I've been there 5 times. I really, really love it. It's like going to outer space. Look at these huge ice cliffs, big icebergs, penguins shooting into the water. And this isn't my photograph, but isn't this an amazing storm? Even the big ship we're in was leaning over to one side. It was so windy, like a hurricane. And then this incredible ice cliff. This was up in the Arctic, where huge chunks of ice as big as skyscrapers were falling into the sea. And on the way when I went to Antarctica the first time, we stopped at Macquarie Island on the way back. And it was the inspiration for a book called One Small Island that I did with Coral Tulloch. And this beautiful island, it was one of the last places discovered on Earth, and the people who discovered it were sealers. They were going down there to hunt seals because in those days seal skin was very valuable. And because they sometimes ran out of food, because sometimes the ships would get wrecked coming down, it's about halfway between Tasmania and Antarctica, they took rabbits down so they'd always have something to hunt and eat. And slowly the rabbits overtook the island till poor Macquarie Island was almost destroyed. And a few years ago, the Australian government put in a huge program, millions, I think $22 million, and they poisoned all the rabbits and all the rats and all the mice and all the feral cats. So now this beautiful island is restored. Here's some of the lovely king penguins on there, all standing around. It's kind of like they're going, what's going on? And also lots of elephant seals on that island. The mothers come to Macquarie Island to have their babies, and they get them really, really fat, and then the mothers have to leave. So all the babies are there, just these big roly-poly babies. And they're always saying to people, "Are you my mother?" So often the expeditioners find them right on their doorsteps. It's a very, very beautiful place. There's the lovely Aurora Australis. Does anyone know or the Southern Lights, does anyone know what the other name for the Northern Lights is? Aurora, yep. Aurora Borealis. Yeah, that's right. Very special thing to see. I love flying, and I have to tell you, I don't know how many of you go on a plane very often, but my advice is to always sit near the window because you see the most incredible things. Here's a beautiful river when I was flying up to Mornington Island once, and here is just beautiful clouds over the water when I was going to New Guinea, and then this was coming back from New Guinea, looking down at the coral reef. It's like, I just think I'm a little bit scared of flying, but I'm so amazed by what I can see out the window that it nearly always overtakes me. On that trip to New Guinea, I went to a little school, and this was how a lot of the kids got to school. They came in their own little outrigger canoe. So there's lots and lots of ways of existing in our beautiful world. Just a simple picture like this, a picture of some shadows of us all waving on a bridge. And I love this photo. I didn't take this one either, but I used it in a book that I did, a novel I wrote called The Snow Pony. And I just love that picture of a horse up on the high plains. That horse's name was Spook. He was a lovely old horse. And the people all standing around the cattleman's hut. It's very misty. You can hardly see anything. And then this one too. Who doesn't like a bonfire? Isn't a fire at night? I just love having a fire. Just the best thing. So that idea of huddled around a fire. And then I also like taking photos in the dim light. So this is down at our beach house at Magic Beach. And this is looking through the trees onto the water. And this was very much the mood for Kissed by the Moon, a book that I did for babies that's very much set down that way. So all the time when I was drawing this book, I was thinking about that landscape down there. It's really like a baby's blessing. It starts off with a baby sleeping, and it says, "May you, my baby, sleep softly at night, and when dawn lights the world, may you wake up to birdsong." So it goes through all the things that you hope the world will give your baby. Nothing material, just sunshine and shelter, and then finally to be kissed by the moon. So it says, "May my baby eat from the garden, be kind to its creatures, and smile at the flowers. May dogs and cats love you." Oh, what does it say? "Follow you, love and watch over you, and animals all be your friends. May my baby splash in the ocean." And then finally it says, "And may my baby be kissed by the moon." And the idea of getting kissed by the moon is the whole idea for this book came from a sweater, like a jumper. You know how they always have a label up the back? I used to have a green one that I really liked, and the label was "Kissed by the Moon." I think it came from New Zealand. And I remember saying to someone, that would be such a great title for a book. So it's slightly odd, isn't it, that a book actually came from a jumper label. But when I started to think about how I would turn it into a book, I was doing a lot of running at that stage, and often at home I would get up early and run before it was light, and I'd sometimes find myself running in moonlight, and I'd be running along and there'd be moon shadows coming on me, and I thought, that is kind of like being kissed by the moon. So that helped me do the book too. Now I've got a whole series of slides about how I actually make a book. So this is one of the first things I do once I get my idea. "May my baby be sprinkled with sand, search for shells and fishes and splash in the waves." So these are my first words, and by the time the book's finished, I might have written these out 20 or 30 times. I always do this. I make a storyboard which shows each page and what's going to happen on every page. And for most books, I would easily do 12 of these. So I've done hundreds of them over my life. And then once I put it into my computer and my editor starts working with me, we go through it and we make, sometimes on the phone, sometimes we're not sitting face to face, and we say, is it going to be cooled? Or, we change lots of words. Changing all the time, and sometimes writing a little storyboard alongside it. So lots of really just messy stuff at the moment. And for me, this is the hardest part. Like once I actually get my drawings done and start painting, that's really good fun. It's like having my own colouring book. But at this stage, when I have to make the drawings work, it's quite difficult. Again, more just figuring out how it's going to fit. Will the pictures bleed? Will they go right to the edge of the page, or will there be a white border? And I start doing lots of little sketches of what things are going to look like. Often I draw really, really small, and then I have to blow them up. With this book, when I was just trying to draw what the baby looked like, I was flying home from somewhere, and I didn't have anything to write on, so I did these drawings on a sick bag. Can you see it says, "If affected by motion sickness, please use this bag." So, yeah, you just write on whatever you can get your hands on. So there's a very early drawing. May my baby laugh at the butterflies. When I started this book, I thought I would be able to do it all with monoprints. I don't know if any of you have done monoprinting, but it's when you roll some paint out onto a piece of glass and draw on a bit of paper on the top of it, and where you press picks up the paint. So you get lots of accidental smudges. But I found that I really couldn't control it enough. It was just a bit too messy, and sometimes it was really, really messy. So I thought I'd better just go, or really, really messy. So in the end, I decided just to draw. I think I drew in charcoal and then scanned it into the printer. So lots of drawings early on. I wanted to draw a baby that you couldn't tell if it was a boy or a girl, and it was just kind of like a normal baby that could be anyone's baby. So this is a picture of the baby. It's about playing in the snow, I think. So there's lots of early drawings of the baby doing this. So you can, I think that's the one I used. Dogs running past, dogs looking on. You know, has anyone been to the snow and made a snow angel? Where you lie in the snow and do that? It's lovely, isn't it? So that's the drawing that I ended up doing, and I think that's what you can see what it looks like when it's coloured. So it can take me lots and lots of times to get a drawing right. And this is the one where the baby's playing with a dog, so there's a few different drawings of dogs to try and get them right. I like that one of the baby. I think that's a golden retriever, isn't it? They're pretty nice dogs to have with babies. And then the babies and the cat and the kittens are all following. Sometimes I'll draw and I think, oh no, that baby's bottom's too big, or the tummy's too big, or the arms are too long. You really have to not be stingy with your drawing when you're making a book. You have to be prepared to draw 20 drawings to get one good one. And I think that's good advice for you too when you're doing things. Don't expect every drawing you do to be a masterpiece. It's a bit like playing netball or footy or the piano. You can't just sit down and do it and do a great one. You have to do lots of practices. So just treat drawing as something that you do all the time, and just every once in a while you'll get a really good one. So here's the baby, and you can see I've chopped up these and stuck them together, and then that's how it looked. I actually had to draw the wool with my computer mouse because I couldn't scan it in again. And there's the baby resting with a little Jack Russell in the foreground. And then here's a picture of the baby running in the rain. So this was the first go. Another one with an umbrella flying away. Another one splashing in puddles. And then I saw a picture somewhere of a little kid in the rain just putting her face up to it like that. And I thought that was probably the way to go. And that's how the picture ended up. So you can't see the adult much. You can just see the shape of them, but you can see the baby enjoying the raindrops. I don't just do picture books, I do novels as well. And this is a book called The Quicksand Pony. And I didn't really have to think up this story much at all because it came from a real family story. I'm not one of those babies. That's my two sisters and my cousin on Taffy with my dad. And Taffy was a big, you know those buckskin horses? He was kind of a yellow colour with a black mane and tail and black legs and a whitish nose, and he had one blue eye. He was a very sweet horse. When we were kids, we used to see how many kids could fit on him, and we could fit an awful lot of kids along his back. But at this stage, we lived on our farm, and my dad and his brother, my uncle, used to take cattle down to Wilson's Promontory to put the cattle there to eat the grass there in the winter. And one day when they were bringing cattle home, Taffy got bogged in the quicksand, and they had to come home and leave him bogged on the beach. They tried to get him out and they couldn't. And they had 200 steers on the beach, and the tide was coming in, so they had to keep going. And we were little kids, and we'd ridden out to meet my dad and the mob of cattle, and they just never came. So as it got dark, we went home, and we could see that my mum was really upset. And as we were having dinner, we heard bullocks bellowing and whips cracking and dogs barking, so we knew they were back. And when my dad walked into the kitchen, we could see by his face that something terrible had happened, and he told us that they'd had to leave Taffy bogged on the beach, and it was an awful cold, windy night, and we could imagine poor Taffy lying there stuck in the sand with the tide coming in. So we all went to bed in tears, but our dad said to us, don't give up, who knows, he might be able to get out. And when we got up in the morning, we went down to the kitchen, and there was Taffy standing at the kitchen at the garden fence. So when the tide had come in, he'd managed to swim out of the quicksand and come home all the way by himself. So that became the inspiration for the book that was The Quicksand Pony. And you can tell I was a horsey little kid. I got Inky for Christmas when I was 6. I don't know if any of you put pillowcases out for your presents, do you, from Santa? Pillowcases are quite good because you can fit a lot in them. Anyway, when I was 6, I put 2 pillowcases out because I thought, if I put 2 pillowcases out, I might get a lot of stuff. But when I woke up in the morning, they were both empty, and I was so sad. And I thought, rather religiously that Santa had punished me for being greedy. And I went in to see my mum and dad, and I was in tears, and I said, Santa didn't give me anything because I put out 2 pillowcases. And mum said, calm down, go and have another look. There might be something really little in there. So I felt in the first one there was nothing. In the second one there was a little bit of paper. Luckily I could read, and I read it, and it said, Dear Alison, go and look in the cattle yards. Happy Christmas, love from Santa. And I raced up to the cattle yards, and there was Inky. So Santa bought me a pony, which was pretty cool. She was such a quiet old horse. We used to dress her up in clothes. We had a pretty fat auntie, and once we put my auntie's cardigan on her, so we wriggled one leg and then put it over her back and wriggled the other leg in. And yeah, she didn't mind you doing anything like that. And then this is my other novel, The Snow Pony, which is set up on the high plains. This is One Small Island, the book that Coral Tulloch and I wrote about Macquarie Island, where I've made the aurora just a big streak across the sky. And this is how little Macquarie Island is. It's just a tiny little speck of an island in the middle of that huge Southern Ocean. So lots of the animals go to have their babies there. These are the pages that Coral did. So she does this beautiful work that looks really old. So she did these old diary entries, and I did my style. But this was a fabulous story that came with this book. When we were researching the book, there was a parakeet called the Macquarie Island parakeet that is now extinct. So when the sealers went there with their cats and their dogs, they killed all the Macquarie parakeets, so they don't exist anymore. And I was trying to find a picture of one so I could draw it, and someone said to me, you know where there'd be one? There'd be one in the Zoological Museum in St. Petersburg in Russia, because there was a Russian explorer called Bellinghausen who came to Macquarie Island in 1820, and there's records of him buying a Macquarie Island parakeet from a sealer for a bottle of rum. So I thought, wow, that'd be so good to see that. So I looked up the Zoological Museum in St. Petersburg online, and I found their website, and I found an email address for one person. So I wrote to him and I said, look, I'm a children's author in Australia and I'm doing a book about Macquarie Island. I believe you have a Macquarie Island parakeet. Can you tell me if you do have? So he went downstairs and he found it in the storage vaults and took a photo of it and sent it to me. So that was just a great bit of detective work. And now the island has been restored. Sorry, I should go back one. Now the island has been restored. The scientists are thinking of bringing a parakeet, because this bird can't fly, it lives on the ground, that's why all the cats and dogs could eat it. But they're thinking of bringing a really similar parakeet from the closest island and letting them develop again, so the island will have a bird pretty much like that one that is now extinct. This is a book called The Little Divers, which is not the book I'm working on now, but the next one. And the inspiration from this very much came from going swimming with my grandchildren and them trying on flippers for the first time. And I couldn't get over, they went so fast, but they also looked so funny. So that's how it started. But it's also been inspired by going to beautiful places like the Abrolhos Islands. Have any of you been out there? Up near Geraldton, just such a beautiful place. And on a still night like this, the reflections are absolutely gorgeous. There's a stingray flying along. I might even use some of these photographs in the book. And the year before last, I was lucky enough to go up to Exmouth and go out and go swimming with the whale sharks. And I'm not a very good swimmer, and we were like way out in the ocean. And they said, okay, now the thing you have to be really careful is you're not allowed to get too close to them. So we all had to jump in. I'm like, oh my God, this is so scary. They were huge, big swells, and the water was like navy blue. It was so deep. And I was just thinking, I hope I don't drown here. Anyway, someone said, it's here. So I took a big breath and went down with my snorkel, and the whale shark was like there. So you can look at he's looking like, gosh, get out of my way. So we both got a terrible fright. And I didn't get into trouble, but I had a lot of trouble. It's very hard to go backwards when you're not a very good swimmer. And the whale shark was coming towards me. So it was, a very interesting encounter. And this is another lovely book that came out last year. I do a few books that I do with other people. I don't just do them on my own. And I told you before that I go and work at the Royal Children's Hospital. And a couple of years ago, the hospital were really keen to do a book that the kids, all the patients at the hospital had made. And for a while we tried to write a story, but it was too hard because the kids came and went and we were only there once a month. So in the end, Janie and I wrote a story called The Silver Sea. And the kids did all the illustrations for it. So that's not a very good example. That's just the cover. But if you look at this, it's about two kids who sneak out of their beach house at night and go down to the sea and then swim out into the sea and dive down to the darkest part. So I did the backgrounds and I did the children, but all the animals and the stars and things were done by patients at the hospital. Sometimes these kids were really sick and we had to go and work with them in their rooms and we had to have masks and completely protect them from any germs, but often they could come to the little classroom in the school. So over about 6 months they did sea dragons and squid and hammerhead sharks and all sorts of things. And then we made these big collages. Because their work was quite big, the backgrounds were 1 metre high, about 1.5 meters long, so it was a very big lot of work to do. This is when they're coming up from the very darkest place. And then this was one of my drawings. I did the characters on brown paper, so it was almost like a comic book that you were looking, that they were separate from the backgrounds. So here you can see, it's a funny angle, but this is my dining room table at home with 2 of these huge pieces on it before we started sticking all the animals on. So there the kids are sneaking out of their house and going down to the sparkling sea. So this is the background for the cover, a big watercolour with pink and blue. And then these were some of the whales I did. I had to do a variety of whales before I got the right one. So they're all just lying on the carpet at home. And there's one stuck on a background. And that's the cover's got like a gloss silver on it. So that was the template I made for that. And then you can see it all put together. So that the glossy template and the kids' drawings and the children going home on the whale. And that project has raised, I think by now it's raised about $50,000 for the Royal Children's Hospital, because the publishers just got their costs back and we didn't take any royalties, so every copy that got sold raised money for the hospital. And then I went on holidays just after I finished, and they're exactly the same colours were in the sky at Yamba. And then when Janie met me at the hospital to show me the book, look what she's wearing, exactly the same colours. So sometimes things just work out in a very coincidental way. The book that I'm working on now is called The Painted Ponies, and it's been in my head for a long, long time. After I drew this little set of ponies prancing along, I don't even know what I did this for, but I started getting this little rhyme in my head. How does it go? The gold palomino, the chestnut, the bay, the pinto, the brown, and the dappley grey. That's what it is now. It's gone through lots of different ones. And I started to think of that rhyme and how nice it would be to repeat it through a book. And this is what the cover's going to look like. There you go, Elise. That's what the cover's looking like now. So we've had to, Elise is my editor on this book, so we've had to do the cover a few times. So here's Lucky, whose family have a travelling show, and she's galloping around the circus ring. So the title of the book will go in the lasso, and my name will go underneath it. So they're her 6 ponies, the gold palomino, the chestnut, the bay, the pinto, the brown, and the dappley grey. Look at her, isn't she clever? That's the wrong caption for it. Here it says, and the dappley grey was mine. She trotted sure and steady as I danced and tumbled on her back. But see how long the pony's neck is? I've got to make that neck shorter. She looks like a giraffe, doesn't she? So sometimes when I'm doing my drawings, I can't see that at the time, and it takes me or Elise or someone else to go, Alison, don't you think that pony's neck is a bit long? And I go, oh, it is too. She looks like a giraffe. So sometimes I don't redraw the whole drawing. I might just actually cut a chunk out of her neck, and then I'll scan it into the computer and fix up any little errors there. So which one? Do you think she should be like a ballet dancer, or do you think she should be like a cowgirl? Well, that's good, because that's what we decided too. Yeah, I like the fact of her doing a handstand on a horse. It's much better than doing ballet, I think. Though I do worry a little about her boots. I think her boots hurt the pony a little bit, so I might have to change her boots so she has slippers on. But the saddly thing could be quite hard, so maybe that's protecting the pony. And I think I've nearly got to the end, but I showed you this picture before. This is the lighthouse on Wilson's Promontory. And I've got another story in my head. I don't know if I've written anything for yet, but at the moment it's called Jonah and the Cow, I think it's called. And it's because families used to live at this lighthouse. There used to always be 3 families living here, and there was a little school there. And when you're there, you just feel like you're absolutely on the very edge of Australia, like there's nothing in front of you until you get to Antarctica. And I love the idea of someone living there who wasn't a lonely kid, but they actually like spending a lot of time alone. And the other kids tease them a little bit, so they're often off doing their own thing. And their thing is, this kid, I don't even know if it's a boy or a girl yet, but at the moment we're calling him Jonah, is obsessed with whales, because a lot of whales go past there. And often when he's off writing notes about whales and looking out for them, the cow that lives there too is hanging around. And he finds the cow just completely annoying and thinks she's stupid, so he doesn't notice her at all. But one night when he's out, this big storm comes up, and as he's trying to get back to the lighthouse, he actually gets washed off the cliff and into the sea. And as he's bobbing around there, nearly drowning, he hears and a big whale comes past. And because he loves whales so much, he really thinks this whale is going to save him, but the whale just keeps going. And then he hears another and it's the cow, and the cow's been washed in as well. So he manages to sit on the cow and they float along. And this is where I hope they're going to end up. This is a beautiful island called Skull Rock, and I'm hoping a big wave can swoosh them up so they land up in that grassy part. You know what's up there? This is the most incredible story. There are cannonballs up there that someone found a long time ago. So years ago, when you had cannonballs on ship, someone had target practice and shot them into that big cave. It's incredible, isn't it? So I think that would be a nice place for Jonah and the whale to finish up, so everyone goes looking for them and finally they realise that they're safe over there. Anyway, I think that's it. I'll end on that one so you've got something to do. So we've probably got about 10 minutes or a few minutes for questions. That's perfect. Anyone got any questions?
Okay, here we go.
Do you have any tips on drawing backgrounds for stories?
Sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
Do you have any tips on drawing backgrounds for stories?
You mean actually filling in characters or drawing the backgrounds of pictures? Yeah, I think that's really hard too. And you know what I sometimes do now? I just get the designer to put a colour in there, because it's really hard, isn't it, to fill in the background and keep it neat. One thing you can do is if you've got an image, you can cover it with stuff called masking solution. So it's like a rubber paint, so that stops any colour getting onto that area. And then you can just do a big wash over it, so you don't get all those little mistakes where the dry is joining up with the wet. And then when the whole thing's dry, you rub that rubber paint and it comes off, and the thing that you have had in the foreground is protected. So that's one way of getting a flat background, but it's probably easy just to do it on the computer.
How long have you been a writer for?
When I started making books, I illustrated for about 5 years, and then I started writing after that. So I think I've probably been going for about 35 years, and now I'm 66. So I must have been doing it when I was 34. Does that make sense? Are my sums right? I'm terrible at sums,
30,
but a long time.
That's about 30 years, I think. Yeah. Okay.
What's your favourite story that you made?
Oh, thanks. That's a nice question. Usually people say, which is the favourite book? I think probably one of my favourite stories is The Quicksand Pony. I love that story because it's so romantic, and it's got 2 kids in it who really have a really great adventures and just do their own thing and don't worry too much about, whether they're safe or not. But my favourite book is a bit like having to say which of my grandchildren or children I like the best, and of course I love them all in different ways.
Why did you choose to be an author?
I really love it because I can do it from home. I can stay in my jammies all day if I want to. That's pretty nice. And I love making up stories, and I love drawing and painting, so it was like it never feels like work to me. And then the other bonus is I get to travel around and meet people like you, and yeah, it's a pretty nice job.
Okay, we've got a question over here.
How much books have you done?
I think I've probably done somewhere between 30 and 40. I've been doing it for a long time, and I usually do one a year. Yep.
When did you start drawing?
Well, I started drawing as soon as I could hold a pen. I always, when I was your age, I drew all the time. And for any of you who love drawing, just do it as much as you can. You know, don't expect everything to be a masterpiece, but just draw all the time. Try different things. Try drawing with your left hand. Try drawing a milk carton. Try drawing a cat. Try drawing a jug that looks like a cat. Like, just experiment all the time. Draw with charcoal, draw with a stick, draw with a pencil, draw with a paintbrush. Just try different things all the time, but keep doing it.
These are such good tips, Alison. Here's another question.
Have you seen all these things in real life?
I have, yeah. So remember, if you go on a plane, sit near the window.
How long does it take you to make one book?
Oh, that's a good question. It really depends if I can stay at my desk. I can't say this because Elise is looking at me and she knows how bad I am. But I always think if I went to school and just worked on a book, so if I came and worked and then had a little play and worked and had lunch and worked and went home, I could probably get a book done in a term or a semester. But there's a lot of other things that get in the way, so it's really hard for me to actually get time to sit at my desk. Some books, like Are We There Yet, took me 10 years to do. But I have done a book in 3 months too.
Okay, we had a question here. Where are you? Eager one. Yes.
Who's your favourite author that's not you?
For kids' books or adult books?
Kids or adults' books? Kids.
Let me think. There's a whole lot I really, really love. Off the top of my head, I would have to say Chris Van Alsberg is a real favourite, who did the Midnight Express. But I also love, what's his name, who did Shrek and, is it William De Soto, is that his name? No, he did Dr. De Soto. William Steig. I think he's dead now, but I really love his books. They're very crazy and funny.
Do we have a question? Do you do the printing processes for the book?
No, that all has to go off. I write the words and I do the pictures, and then a designer puts it all together. So they choose the font. That's like the style and the shape of the letters, and we talk together about where it's going to go on the page and whether the pictures will have white around them or not white around them, and what sort of paper we're going to use and what size and shape the book will be. And then the pictures all go off and they get proofed so they can make sure the colour's right, and then it goes off to a printing factory in China maybe, and it all gets printed and bound up together into a book. I'm not very good at that stuff.
Which publisher do you use?
I'm pretty lucky that I have a few. Allen and Unwin were my first no, they weren't. My first publisher was Oxford University Press. So they were the first people that gave me a break. But then Allen and Unwin have been one of my main publishers for a long time, and Penguin and a firm. I never really mean to go to different publishers, but I make friends with people and then they go and work in different publishing houses. So I end up having a lot of different publishers. I don't think it's what you're supposed to do.
How much do you love writing and drawing?
I love it pretty much. The funny thing is, when I'm writing, I'm kind of like, oh, this is so hard. I wish I was drawing. And then when I'm drawing, I think, oh, this is so hard. I wish I was writing. But I really love just making up the stories the most. I love it when I have a bit of a brainwave and I go, I know what can happen. Like in the Painted Ponies, there's 7 dogs that are part of the show. And I suddenly realised that they could all be brothers and sisters, and that maybe the family found them in a cardboard box on the side of the road, and they named them after the town that they were near at the time. So now they're called the Yakandanders, and they all have their own names. But as a group, the dogs, they say, and now we have the Yakandanders, and the 7 dogs all come running on and do their tricks. So I like it when I have a brainwave like that.
Okay, so we've got 2 more questions, one from this side.
When you write your books, when you finish it, how do you know that it's right?
How do I
know it's right?
Oh, well, sometimes I don't. Sometimes I think it's right, and the editors will go, there's something wrong with this, Alison. But sometimes you just get a good feeling that you think, yep, that's perfect, that's the way it is. But often when I'm working, I'm too close to see if it's any good or not. So I really need someone else to have a look at it and say, yeah, this works. If I was reading this book, I wouldn't find anything wrong with it. And that's why you need to get people to read your stories too. Often, if you've written a story, it's a really good idea to get someone to read it aloud back to you. Because if you read it, you actually skim over mistakes that you can't see, but your friend will read the words that are on the page. So that's a great way to check for mistakes.
What was your favourite moment?
Ever? Probably my favourite moment ever was having my first baby. That was just like, wow, this is pretty good. This is a whole person who's going to be in my life forever. That's probably my favourite moment.
That's a nice one to end on. I have so many disappointed people in the audience who couldn't have their question answered, but that's just because you have been so interesting, Alison. Thank you so much for sharing such a lot of beautiful stories, so many beautiful stories from your life, both in your writing and today with the children. Can you guys please do a massive cheer and a round of applause for Alison Lester?
Thanks. Can I thank you very much. Can I thank you two for being such a beautiful audience? It's always nice looking up and having a whole lot of happy faces looking at me and asking such great questions. So thanks for coming and thanks for your beautiful manners. And good luck with your writing and illustrating. Just keep doing it.
That's great advice. Thank you.